What up, y'all? It's your hometown hero, the real Adam Coleman. Y'all know what it is, man. You're riding with Tru-ID. Now, my question for this video right here is, why do so many conversations between Christians on the subject of race go absolutely nowhere? Now, actually, I think there's a number of different reasons, but I'm going to break down one of the main ones, at least in my opinion. Now, to do that, I'm going to be drawing some insights from an excerpt of an interview with what I believe to be a true, underappreciated legend of the civil rights movement, Miss Fannie Lou Hamer. Fannie Lou Hamer was a true freedom fighter. She was from Mississippi. She emerged in the 1960s as a champion for the cause of securing the right to vote and political representation for African Americans. I mean, we're talking about a woman who was actually detained by the police and beaten for attempting to vote and encouraging others to do the same. Now, in 1964, Fannie Lou Hamer was co-founder of the Freedom Democratic Party. And I'm about to play a clip from an interview where she's being asked about her involvement with the party and where that party stood on a number of different issues. Now, I want you to listen to her response to a question that she was asked about communism. Check it out.
One of the other major issues regarding Asia, of course, is recognition of China, what they call it Communist China here, and admission of China to the United Nations, of Peking government to the Chinese seat in the United Nations. Does the party have a position on that?
Well, we don't have a position on that. But I hear the word communist quite often. In fact, I have been called a communist. And I begin to question now, if communists stand for all the things we fight for? Because, you know, if all the things we fighting for, if communists stand for that, it'd be a whole lot more than we've ever been offered in this country. But I don't know anything about communism. If I've ever seen a communist, I don't know it.
Well, in fact, President de Gaulle is pledged now to actively work for the seating in the United Nations of Communist China. He's recognized Communist China, and I don't think he's a communist.
Is that right?
Of course, yes.
Well, that's great. You know, you see, I don't know actually anything about communism. But everybody I see, you know, if we push just a little farther than they think we should push, you know, then they say this is communist. So I began to wonder about communists, because from what the people is really telling us, it must be very good.
So I want to draw from what Ms. Hamer said in that interview and say a bit about my own experiences as I talk about labeling. Now, I'm just sharing my own experiences here, but I think that a lot of people relate to what it is I'm about to describe. See, I thought it was interesting what Ms. Hamer said about fighting for justice and in the process of doing so being called a communist, even though she had no interest or involvement with communism or the Communist Party or anything like that. Now, I can relate to that. And as I think about the conversations about race and justice that I've come across or been engaged in recently, I think a lot of other people probably can as well. See, I've noticed that no matter how biblical, fair, and clear thinking you try to be, some folks will still resort to throwing labels at you as a way to dismiss what you're saying. Now, as soon as I say anything about race, justice, or whatever, I already know which labels are coming my way. Social justice warrior, cultural Marxist, leftist, liberal, whatever, you know what I'm saying? Or they'll be like, you know, you're preaching critical race theory and ethnic Gnosticism. You know, and of course, my favorite, honestly, is, you know, people call me a racist or that I hate cops and dumb stuff like that, right? I mean, you know the church is in trouble when people are so caught up in society, politics, the battle between Democrats and Republicans or whatever, that they can't tell the difference between a clear expression of Matthew 23:23 and critical race theory. I mean, it's just silly, dog, for real. It really is. Now, I think that people mislabel others in this way for at least three reasons. Number one, some people engage in labeling rather than listening, because they're honestly just too lazy to invest their emotions into giving others the benefit of the doubt, having their own views challenged, and maybe actually changing their perspectives on something they feel really strongly about. I think a second reason why people use labeling in this negative sort of a way is they're focusing in on similarities between positions that people may hold while not paying enough attention to the differences. Just because two perspectives on an issue have some overlap or share some common feature doesn't mean that those two positions are the same. For example, if I say that racism is a major and pervasive problem in society, it may be that many who endorse critical race theory would also say the same thing. But that single point of agreement doesn't justify labeling me as a proponent of critical race theory. All right, watch this, all right? Let's say you're in a conversation with a Muslim and a Christian, okay? And the Muslim says, I believe there's one God, right? And then following that, the Christian says, I also believe there's one God. And then you say, aha, well, Mr. Christian, you're actually a Muslim. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it would obviously be pretty ignorant of you to say that, just based upon that one similarity. Why? Because as you begin to have further discussions about their theologies, you'll see that there's some significant differences. The Christian would say that God is a Trinity, whereas the Muslim would vehemently disagree with that. The Christian would say that, God became man in the flesh and died on the cross. The Muslim would take that to be the severest kind of blasphemy and would totally disagree, right? So even though they have this commonality in that the Christian and the Muslim would agree there's one God, as you begin to tease out these differences, you see that the two worldviews are really miles apart. And it's the same way with anything else. As the Bible says, we need to be quick to listen and slow to speak. There's an important distinction to be made between similarities and sameness. So take the time to gather information as to where somebody's coming from before you mischaracterize their position or slap them with some sort of label that really doesn't fit where they're coming from. Okay, thirdly, I think some folks rely on labeling to win conversations rather than actually providing evidence and solid arguments for their position. Unfortunately, I see this a lot on social media and actually even in conversations that I have with folks where people will use labeling towards others to dismiss their perspective without any good reason to do so. Again, it's just laziness, just of a different sort than what I mentioned before. The fact of the matter is we all use categories and labels to some extent to navigate social situations and understand things about ourselves and others. But I want to encourage us all to avoid the use of labeling in ways that become barriers to meaningful and productive dialogue. Now, to avoid barriers like these, I actually think there's a few simple steps that we can take. But before I go there, let me just say this. If you like what you're seeing, then please subscribe to the channel. Hit that like button, share the video. If you've been beefing with somebody back and forth and you feel like they've been labeling you, share the video. This might help them to gain some understanding about where you're coming from or how to understand your position better. Or maybe it's just food for thought for you that maybe you want to apply and you figure, hey, maybe somebody else can use it as well. Either way, man, subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, hit the share button. Hit me up on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I'll put the links in the description. And if you feel so inclined, holla at me on Patreon, man. I've got some supporters there that enable me to do what it is that I'm doing here. So if you want to get with Tru-ID on that tip, it would be much appreciated. I'll put the link in the description as well. Okay, so let's finish out with a quick and easy pro tip about these barriers I was talking about. In the midst of challenging conversations, it might be helpful to ask questions like these. So number one, am I really listening or am I just trying to be heard? Number two, am I really taking into account the entirety of what this person is saying, or am I just being hasty and making assumptions that they really fit into this group that I've labeled them with? Number three, am I using labels as a quick and easy way to disregard what somebody is saying? Now, I think if we're all mindful of these things, then we would find that we're actually putting ourselves in a better position to be heard by others and also to learn from others as well. And as I said before, if you know better, you can grow better. And with that being said, y'all know what it is, man. I love y'all. Got a whole lot more content coming out on the channel, so stay tuned. And in the meantime, man, love God, love people, and take care of the things that God blesses you with. Peace.